Ah yes, the Dragon type. Home to some of the most iconic and epic Pokemon in the series like Garchomp, Haxorus, Salamence, and Appleton? Yeah, not too sure what's going on there, but otherwise these are some of the sickest Pokemon, and we are not talking about Pokepox here. So I decided to see if I could follow in the Dragon Master Lance's footsteps and beat Pokemon Ultra Sun with hardcore Nuzlocke rules using only Dragon types. Before we get into the run, you know I gotta show off the rules. You can pause here if you're interested. And normally this would be where I would show off all the possible encounters in the game. But honestly, the Pokemon that we catch in this game are so crazy, you wouldn't even believe me. So I'm gonna keep it a mystery. You're gonna have to watch through the video to find out who we actually catch. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. Pokemon Sun and Moon and their Ultra counterparts take place in the beautiful tropical island region of Alola. After taking in some of the beautiful sights and sounds of our new home, we're attacked by a bloodthirsty rat, which naturally means that we have to choose which of these animals we want to use to kill it. And obviously none of these are dragons, so we end up choosing Rowlet, which means that Hau in his infinite wisdom will choose Poplio, which ends up evolving into Primarina, which is a water fairy type, which means that it has an immunity to dragon type moves and also hits all of our dragons super effectively. We don't actually end up getting our first dragon type until after the first trial, so I'm gonna fast forward till then, but you know I have to shout out my boys in black, Team Skull. Team Skull whoop whoop. But anyway, we dispatch this beautiful brown backflipping beast, and then we find out the trial captain Olivia is actually Italian. Mamma mia, the Totem Pokemon. You know, it's just interesting because you don't normally meet a lot of people from Italy and Alola. Anyway, with the trial out of the way, we can finally head back into the trial cave and get our first catch, a Noibat, which we nicknamed Noiboy. Though it is a girl, but it's still my boy, you know? We head over to the meadows and Lily lets us know that Cosmog is run away again, and we have to go re-kidnap, save him. And while doing this, we get to have our first battle with Noiboy. Okay, let's try that again. This battle with the Ultra Recon Squad actually ended up being so hard for us. And this is mainly due to Noibat's pretty lackluster stats overall. And to actually win this battle, we had to have this Furfrou hit itself in confusion 3 times. Or else we were totally doomed. Luckily, it's pretty early on, and it only took us a few attempts, so we are able to kidnap Cosmog again. Told you to stay in the bag, Cosmog. And we just have a quick Hau fight before we can get a second Pokemon that isn't useless, which goes pretty smoothly, and we're able to move on to the next route and catch a Bagon. Now, originally, I thought I was gonna be really patient and wait this out and get the 1% chance SOS encounter where this Bagon calls in a Salamence, but after a few hours of trying and a whole shiny video that I just released, I decided to just go for it and catch the Bagon. Though this did kill quite a few attempts because I would have to reset after the Bagon encounter if I didn't catch a Salamence or a Bagon. Anyway, we nicknamed this thing Bags and we're on our way. And we're finally able to challenge the first Kahuna. Holla! Our first attempt goes, okay. God, Noibat is bad. But we do manage to work our way back there on the next attempt. And this time we gave Noibat the Sharp Beak, which will boost the damage of his flying type moves and give him the damage he needs to take this Machop out in 2 hits. Next, Hala sends in his Makuhita, who will do a lot less damage than the Machop, so we take this opportunity to use Roost and heal up. After a few more Roosts, a Super Potion from Hala, and some unlucky crits from Makuhita, we finally take this thing out with the final Gust. And Hala sends in his last Pokemon, Crabrawler. We hit it with a Gust, which does about half of its health, and then it hits us with a Pursuit. Thankfully, it didn't use its Z move, and we're able to take it out with another Gust on the next turn. So far, so good, I would say. Oh, no way! Is that Tauros for me? Wait. Actually? Nice! From here, before we leave the first island, we meet back up with the Professor, Lily, and Hau, and what in the world is that thing? Brion, or however you say it, has got to be the ugliest middle evolution of all time. Anyway, we wrap up our business on Melee Island and head to Akala, where we have a good old-fashioned Wild West showdown with Hau. This town ain't big enough for the 2 of us, and we quickly dispatch him. After that, we pretty much head straight into the second trial, which is the water trial against Araquanid. And for this fight, we lead with Noibat, since it hits Araquanid super effectively. And on the first turn, we do big damage with Air Cutter. We get it down to about half health, but it fires back with a 4 times effective Aurora Beam, which does about half of our health. And at the end of the first turn, it calls in its ally Masquerain. This means that Air Cutter will do less damage since there's 2 enemies on the field, and on the next turn, it just barely doesn't kill both Pokemon. And to make matters worse, Masquerain paralyzed us with a Stun Spore. Luckily, the Aurora Beam doesn't take out Noibat, and we put in Bagon, who tanks an Aurora Beam and outspeeds the Araquanid to take it out with Crunch on the next turn. From here, it's as simple as cleaning up the Masquerain on the next turn with Crunch, and that's 2 totems down. And after a brief, shirtless, somewhat awkward run-in with the Master Royale, we're able to move on to the Fire Trial, which takes place on a volcano and is against the Totem Alolan Marowak. Luckily, we grabbed the Thief TM on the last island, so we're able to use it to steal its thick club, which effectively halves the damage this thing is going to be able to put out. Still, it and its ally Salazzle both hit really hard, so we're going to have to be very careful here. But since it doesn't have its thick club anymore, on the next turn we go for a Water Pulse on the Salazzle. And thankfully the Marowak doesn't even attack, it just goes for a detect. And we land a lucky Confusion from the Water Pulse on Salazzle, and it hurts itself in Confusion. The next turn we're able to clean it up with another Water Pulse, and now without the thick club, we're pretty safe here. And we just end up finishing this thing off with a couple Water Pulses over the next few turns. From here we head down the volcano and head into the lush jungle for the grass trial. Oh yeah, sure Mallow, I'm ready to get into some hot water. Wait, you didn't mean me literally in the pot, right? So after we fight off the cannibal trial captains of Akala Island, we get to face off against the grass totem Pokemon Lurantis. And honestly, Noibat just resists all of its moves, and we have Roost, so we pretty much destroy this trial. It just has a ton of annoying healing, so it takes forever to beat this thing. Primarily, we just focus on keeping its allies off the field, and through a combination of Roost, Protect, and Air Slash, we're finally able to take it out over a ridiculous amount of time. The thing is always such a long, annoying fight. After we come out of that battle, the cannibals have regrouped, so we hightail it out of there as fast as possible. But not before we're able to trick a Caterpie into spawning a Goomy for us. Goomy, Sliggoo, and Goodra are some of my absolute favorites, and I am so happy to have this goopy little boy on the team. We end up catching it and nicknaming it Goop, which felt like a fitting, honorable nickname. From here, we head into Coney City, where this lady actually gives us a piece of her husband's old jaw that she's been saving, and we're able to take it over to this trailer park and get it revived into a Tyrant. Sort of feels like a plot to a horror movie, but I'm good with it because we get another Pokemon. Actually, this whole island has kind of felt like a horror movie. It is spooky season after all. We add this bitey boy to the party and he looks so good we nickname him Tyhunk. From here, all we have left to do on this island is take on the island kahuna, Olivia. She specializes in rock types, which is kind of a weird matchup for us. We don't really resist a lot of things on this team, but it's not too big of a deal. She leads with Anorith, so we lead with Tyrant, and we take it out with one Rock Tomb. From here, she brings in Cradily, so we swap in Bagon. Tyrant's a little weak to water and grass, which it has a couple moves of. This Lileep is an absolute tank though, so the main goal is to get through this without it getting an Omni boost from Ancient Power. So we end up weaving in Brick Breaks and Protects so that we can stall out some of the PP without risking that boost. We do manage to get it pretty low, but Olivia uses a Super Potion on it, so we sort of end up back at square one. We get it low again, but Bagon gets a little bit too low and it's a little close for comfort, so we end up bringing in Goomy, who hits a Dragon Breath on the first turn it's in that paralyzes the leap, which baits a full heal from Olivia, and it's able to finish it off on the next turn with another Dragon Breath. Finally, she's down to her last Pokemon, Lycanrock, so we bring Tyrant back in. And we're really worried about a Z-Rock move here, but it actually just goes for a bunch of bites. Unfortunately, we do get flinched a couple times, so Tyrant gets pretty low, but we do manage to get a Charm off on it, which is really what we're looking for so that we can swap in another member of our team who can actually take this thing out. And now we're safe to swap in Goomy, who has a super effective Water Pulse that takes this thing out after a million flinches. And now that we've beaten the kahuna, the level cap is raised, so we're able to evolve Bagon into a Shelgon. Now, after a quick tour through the Aether Paradise and a quick dodge of Yawn to arm around the shoulder from How, nice try there, big guy, we can finally move on to the third island, Ulula Island, where, fueled by the rage of rejection, How challenges us to another battle. And at this point, his team has expanded a little bit, but thankfully Brion has not evolved yet, so it only has fairy moves without stab and no immunity to our dragon type moves, but he does lead with it, so we lead with Goomy, who's able to take it out with 3 shockwaves. Next up, he sends in Alolan Raichu, who hits us with a pretty beefy psychic, and Dragon Breath doesn't really do that much damage to it, so we're forced to swap out Goomy and bring in Shelgon, who's able to tank a couple psychics and take this thing out with a crunch. Next up is his Tauros, who can be a little bit scary, but thankfully we have Tyrant, who resists all its moves, so we bring him in and finish it off with also Crunch. Next up is Noibat, who lands a few cheeky bites on us, but can't stand up to the power of Strong Jaw Crunch from Tyrant. Finally, he's just got his Flareon, who easily goes down to a couple Bulldozes from Tyrant. At this point, there's a bunch of little annoying stuff that we have to take care of in the city, but eventually we end up at the observatory, where we find our next encounter, an Axew. And at this point, you're probably thinking, wow, 3 pseudo-legendaries on the team. He's got this in the bag. But you have to remember that they are pretty useless until they get to their final evolution, and they evolve really late, so this is far from over. Anyway, we nickname this baby dragon Max and immediately evolve it into a Fracture. Okay, so we have Harold, Jerry, Marsha, Mumford, Zane. Wait, what happened to Harold 2, Smelly, and Thomas Jacob Jenkins III? Well, it turns out this guy's bad at his job, so we end up having to bail him out and track down all these charge bugs. Don't you ever scare us again like that, Thomas Jacob Jenkins III. And with that done, we can finally take on this round boy, Totem Togedemaru, who I think does not get nearly enough attention for how freaking thick he is. Anyway, we had a lot of trouble with this fight, and it ended up killing a lot of our attempts just because of flinch luck, man. I hate this fight. This Togedemaru does have beefy defense, so we know we're in it for the long long haul, so we lead with Tyrant and we hit a charm on it on the first turn. Luckily, we don't get flinched, so we can actually lower its attack. And from here, we can bring in our Shelgon, who has leftovers, and protect. And its main job is just to sit in here and soak up hits and maybe karate chop this thing if it can ever not hit against the spiky shield, which we ended up hitting almost every time. I don't know, this thing had a read on us. Eventually Shelgon gets a little too low, so we bring in Fraxure and we hit it with a Shadow Claw, but it does like no damage. Unfortunately, Fraxure can't learn Brick Break, so it doesn't really have a great move choice for this fight. But after a few more turns of stalling, the Togedemaru is actually out of Iron Head PP, so we feel safe to bring Tyrant back in. The goal here being to use Charm to kind of lower some, okay, and we get our first death. At this point, we're running a little low on options, so we bring Goomy in, who actually is able to finish off the Togedemaru with a Water Pulse. At this point, our whole team is pretty low, so we bring in Noibat, who can hopefully finish off Skarmory with some combination of roosting and attacking, since Skarmory's attack stat is pretty lackluster, which, though it does take a while, it does end up doing. And as we're moving to our next stop on our journey, Goomy actually evolves into a Sliggoo, which is hilarious, terrifying, and adorable all at the same time. After destroying Guzma in a quick rap battle in the park and killing some kind of ghost sandcastle thing, we're able to go grab our next catch, a Turtonator, which, if you've seen my fire type only run, you know is just absurdly good. And because of its high defenses and shell armor, we'd nickname this thing Hard Boy. And Hard Boy came just in time, because the next trial is against Totem Mimikyu, which is a fairy type, and fire type actually resists fairy, so at least we have an okay option against it, right? Either way, this is one of the hardest fights in the game. You ever wonder what Mimikyu looks like under that disguise? Okay, I'm back. Dear God, do not Google that. Anyway, for this fight, naturally, we lead with Turtonator, which you might be thinking, okay, Turtonator can just stay in and set up crazy high defense and just wall this thing, right? Unfortunately not, because its ally Banette actually will put a curse on you, which ticks you for 25% of your HP every turn. As you can see, we went for a Shell Smash on the first turn. This is to set up to take out this Banette as fast as possible before it can set a curse on us. For this fight, there's a really delicate balance between stalling out the Play Rough PP from the Mimikyu, while also having really bad matchups against both allies, this and the Jellicent, who has a water type move and will just destroy Turtonator. And honestly, prepping for this fight was really interesting. We do stay in with Turtonator and start stalling with Iron Defense and Protect to start burning as many play roughs as possible so that we're safe to swap in our other dragon types. And we actually managed to get through all the play rough PP before it calls in its ally Jellicent. So we're safe to swap in Shelgon, who takes a slash from Mimikyu and then almost takes out the Jellicent with a crunch, but fortunately on the next turn we take it out with a Dragon Claw. From here, Shelgon gets a little bit low, but we're able to bring in Fraxure, who cleans this whole thing up with a couple Shadow Claws. It definitely takes a little bit of luck to get out of that trial without any deaths. At this point, the gate to the vast Pony Desert is unlocked, and so we ride our horse across it, and you might be thinking, oh, Trapinch spawns out here, he's gonna get a Flygon. Nope. Instead, we opt to add another insane pseudo-legendary, a Gabite, to our team. And we nickname this thing Garbage because it's a bad Pokemon. Look, I just want to have a fun, super strong team for once, okay? And this game is hard. After joining the official Spinda fan club, we head into Po-Town where we challenge Guzma for the throne of Team Skull. And he's made some upgrades to his team since our showdown in the park. On the first turn, I forget First Impression is priority, so he smacks us with a Stab First Impression. Luckily, our slimy boy outspeeds and triggers his emergency exit on the next turn with a Shockwave. Unfortunately, Masquerain comes in and we're a little bit too low to stay in, and Sliggoo was our plan for Masquerain because it's the only thing on our team with respectable special defense. After a few turns frantically searching our team and doing some calculations, we finally settle on bringing in Turtonator because it does resist most of the moves that Masquerain has. Thankfully, through a combination of Leftovers, Protect, and Turtonator just being an absolute beast, we're able to live a couple hits and take it out with a Flamethrower. Next up, he sends in Pitzer, who has the move Storm Throw, which is an auto crit, but we have Shell Armor, but it crits anyway, which is kind of weird. So Turtonator gets a little too low, and we have to bring in Shelgon, who finishes it off with a Dragon Claw. Finally, since it's Golisopod back in, we Protect through the First Impression this time and finish it off with a couple Dragon Claws. And now all that's left to do is challenge Nanu, the Island Kahuna. So we do just that. He leads with Sableye, so we lead with Fraxure. We forget to protect the Fake Out on the first turn, but on the next turn we are able to get a Dragon Dance off. From here, Fraxure tanks a Shadow Ball and then takes it out with a Dragon Claw on the next turn. You might be able to see where this fight is going. Unfortunately, the Krokorok outspeeds us and hits a Swagger on us, which leaves us confused, but unfortunately for him, he gets hit through the confusion and goes down to a +3x Scissor. Next up is his Ace Persian, who does outspeed us, so we do end up taking a Dark Pulse, but unfortunately for him, we snap out of confusion and smack it with an X Scissor as well. And just like that, we're finished with the third island. And as usual, since the level cap is raised, now we get a big wave of awesome evolutions. Gabite evolves into Garchomp, Noibat evolves into Noivern, and with the biggest growth spurt, Fraxure evolves into Haxorus. You think this team is stacked now? You just wait till everyone's evolved. At this point in the story, we have to solid snake our way through the Aether Paradise Paradise, and we're honestly not very good at that. Eventually, we manage to brute force our way through the whole thing, and we end up fighting Guzma again. This fight goes pretty smoothly, so for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to show it. It really just ended up being about the same as the last one. And with the big fight against Lusamine coming up, we decide to go train more, and we evolve Sliggoo into Big Goofy Goodra, and Shelgon into Big Mean Salamence. At this point, our team feels just strong enough to take on Lusamine, so we head back to the Aether Paradise and prepare for battle. Though our team is kind of insane, her team does have good coverage, and she has a lead Clefable, which is pretty intimidating for an all-dragon team. We lead with Garchomp, which we were able to teach Iron Head, which hits the Clefable super effectively. Unfortunately, we get no flinch, and we take a Moonblast, but it doesn't crit, so we live through it, and we take the Clefable out with another Iron Head on the next turn. From here, she sends in Lopunny, who is rocking a 4 times effective Ice Punch, so we swap in Turtonator, and we're able to effectively wall this thing even through an annoying paralysis and confusion, and we take it out with a few flamethrowers. Next up is Melodic, who knows Hydro Pump, so we send in this big ball of fun and certified special wall Goodra, and we are able to effectively live through all the stab boosted Hydro Pumps and take this thing out with a couple Dragon Pulses over the next few turns. Next up, she sends in Beware, who is a hard hitter physically, so we put an Intimidate on it with Salamence, but it does have a super effective Dual Chop, which still does a big amount of damage, and nobody on our team resists it. We actually didn't really plan that well for this, but Salamence is able to do some decent damage with Fly and takes a lot of damage from the Dual Chop on the next turn. At this point, Salamence is too low, so we swap in Haxorus, who tanks the Dual Chop okay and is able to outspeed and get a Dragon Claw off, but it doesn't quite kill, so we have to take another Dual Chop, which hits a crit on us on the next turn. Thank goodness our Berry procced in between the 2 hits, or else we would have just lost Haxorus. We're able to clean it up with another Dragon Claw, but that was a close one. Thankfully, she's down to just her Lilligant, so we swap in Noivern, who's able to take it out with a couple Air Slashes. Lusamine is always a tough fight, but in an ultimate display of dominance, we sleep in her bed that night. Extremely alpha move from our protagonist. The next day, we wake up refreshed and head to the next island, where we have a chance encounter with Alola's #1 matchmaker, and she introduces us to the love of our life. I mean, just look at the way he lumbers over here. Oh, we fall deeply in love and decide to carry on our Pokemon journey as a unit. Anyway, from here we head to Executor Island, where we're able to add another member to our team, Alolan Executor. And I'm not really sure exactly what this thing is supposed to do, but I like it, so I add it to the team. And we nickname it Tall Boy. And we head into, personally, what I think is the most difficult part of this game, Vast Pony Canyon. But before we get into any of the crazy fights, we are able to find and catch a Jangmo-O, which we catch and nickname Janggirl. And in classic Vast Pony Canyon fashion, we aren't paying attention, so we lose Executor. Rip, we barely knew ya. But to replace our fallen comrade, we end up evolving Jangmo-O into Komo-O. Obviously, Haxorus is probably the better choice here, but Komo-O, the pseudo of this gen, we gotta show it off. We fight our way through the rest of the canyon with no casualties, surprisingly, and we challenge the Totem Komo-O. And the Dragon type hits itself super effectively, so this is gonna be kind of an interesting fight because we can both smack each other for a lot of damage. We lead with Salamence to get an Intimidate off, and then we hit it with a Toxic. And you kinda know where this is going, so I'm gonna skip most of it. We swap around through our team, and we ultimately end up with Goodra out when it goes down to the Toxic damage. This final swap was a little bit risky because Dragon Pulse and Dragon Claw together can kill Goodra. Luckily that does not happen, so we send in our own Noiboy to take out this Noivern. And that's one of the harder fights in the run. That's done. From here, Lily and I head up to the Altar of the Sun, and we play a flute duet that goes so hard that it rips a hole in the dimension, which through a series of basically incomprehensible events leads us to an alternate dimension where we have a showdown with Ultra Necrozma. If you ever played this game or seen a run of it, you probably already know how strong this thing is, but it has the highest base stat total of any Pokemon ever. Oh, and it's also 6 levels above the level cap, so we go with the tried and true Focus Sash Toxic combo, which works pretty well, but unfortunately we end up having to sack Noivern, which does allow us to get a free swap into Goodra, who is holding a Dragon super effective berry, so it's able to stall out the rest of the turns that are needed to take out Necrozma. And honestly, it was a hard, but very necessary sacrifice of our Noivern. Rest in peace, Noiboy. With Necrozma defeated, the Ultra Recon squad does give us this Poipole, which does evolve into a Dragon type, so we just might end up using it. And in honor of Noiboy, we nickname this thing Poiboy. From here, there's just one final trial, and it has us go around and collect feathers from all the trial captains. We actually managed to beat all the trial captains this time without losing any Pokemon, and we get into the Rabombi fight without too much issue. This thing is another example of a good old-fashioned Toxic stall. Sorry, this is the last one, I promise. We lead with Salamence, who sets the Toxic and is able to take a Dazzling Gleam on the next turn because of the super effective Fairy Berry that we gave it. We still out with Protect to get a little bit more damage, but unfortunately this thing has a +2 Omni Boost and it used Quiver Dance on the first turn, so it's just way too strong to stay in against, even though we can heal with Roost. We know that Salamence definitely can't take another Dazzling Gleam since it burned its berry, so we swap in Goodra, who takes the Dazzling Gleam like a champ, but goes down to a spit up from Pelipper. We probably should have seen this coming since it was +3 on stockpile, but there was not really anything we could do. Rest in peace, Scoop. From here, we know we just need one more turn of Protect, so we bring Salamence back in, and at the end of the turn, the Ribombee goes down to the toxic damage. From here, all we need to do is take out this Pelipper, but it does not go down without a fight. It burns Salamence, Komodo, and Haxorus, all three on the first Scald it uses. But ultimately, it does go down to a Dragon Claw. And that's all the totems. Now all that's left is Hapu and the Elite Four. From here, we don't waste any time and we head over to Executor Island and challenge Hapu. She leads with Golurk and we lead with Haxorus. And on the first turn, we set up a Dragon Dance and we get hit by an Earthquake from the Golurk. We were really expecting Stealth Rocks here. Luckily, it only does about half of our health, so we can stay in another turn and get another Dragon Dance off, even if it uses Earthquake. Luckily, it goes for Stealth Rocks this time, so we don't even have to worry about a crit from this on an Earthquake, and we take it out with a Shadow Claw on the next turn. Next up, she sends in Flygon, who could be a real menace if we didn't outspeed it, but we took it out with Dragon Claw in one hit, no worries. And next she sends in her Ace Mudsdale. And I don't love the idea of Haxorus getting hit by a Z ground move, so we swap in Salamence to get an Intimidate on it. And the next turn, we use Fly on it, and it does not very much damage, and since it has the ability Stamina, it raises its defense, so we're going to have to rethink our strategy here a little bit. Luckily, it's not doing more than half our health with each hit, and we still have Toxic on Salamence, so we just go for the easy way out and Toxic stall it, which honestly goes off without a hitch. And we even get to land the finishing blow with Fly. Finally, she has just her Gastrodon, and we don't want to use Toxic on this thing, but it keeps recovering every time we hit it with Fly, and we don't have an instant attack, so we can't actually finish it off, and we end up stalling out all its recover PP, and it takes forever. But eventually, the might of Salamence is too much, and we take it down. Elite Four, here we come. But first, we get access to the move reminder, so we're able to teach Poipole, Dragon Pulse, which allows it to evolve into a Noggindel. And we're actually back up to a team of 6 as we head into the Elite Four. Our first stop is against Acerola, because we think we have a really easy sweep with Haxorus if all things go according to plan. Which, spoiler alert, they do. We're able to set up 3 Dragon Dances against this Banette while only taking a little bit of damage. We do take 2 Screeches, which lowers our defense by 4 stages, so we better hope that we sweep this. I think that it kind of goes without saying that a +3 Shadow Claw from Haxorus does take out a Banette in one hit. Next up, she sends in Frostlass, who we definitely need to outspeed because it does have sweeping potential, which we do, and we take it out with a Shadow Claw. Next up is our Ace Palisand, who is the only thing that could potentially live through a Shadow Claw, but we get a crit and we don't have to worry about hitting it twice or it hitting us through our lowered defense. Next up, Delmise comes in and of course goes down to a Shadow Claw. And finally, just Drift Blim, and we take it out, but we do take some aftermath damage, but nothing to worry about. And Acerola just spooky dances through the pain. Gotta respect it. Next up, we head in to challenge the Steel-type trainer, Moylaine, whose team is always a little bit spooky. Luckily, we do have Garchomp, who through a combination of 2 super effective stab digs and a Brick Break is able to take out this Klefki. Next up is Metagross, who is only really a threat because we accidentally misclick Brick Break instead of dig on the second turn to finish it off. From there, Moylaine uses a full restore, so it gets back to full health. Nothing a couple more digs can't solve, but still annoying to take this much damage on this thing. We finish it off, and then he sends in his Ace Dugtrio, and this thing runs Fissure, so we end up swapping in Salamence because we do not want to play around with losing Garchomp to a Fissure. It does hit us with a Z Steel move, which does a little bit of damage, but honestly, if that is the most it can do in one turn, Salamence is not worried because we do have Roost. From here, we hit it with a Fly, and then on the next turn, another Fly is enough to take it out. Next up is his Magnezone, so we bring Garchomp back in. But unfortunately, this thing has Sturdy, so one dig is not enough to take it out. But no worries, we do have more PP, so we can use it again on the next turn and finish it off. Finally, he's down to just his Bisharp, who somehow manages to live through a 4 times effective Brick Break, but on the next turn, we outspeed it and we finish it off, and that's 2 down, 2 to go. Our next stop is the rematch against Olivia, the Rock-type trainer. And finally, Komodo gets a chance to shine. We set up max defense with Iron Defense, and then in a real war of attrition way, we Brick Break our way to victory. After trading a ton of blows, Armaldo finally goes down. Then she sends in Probopass, who gets easily dispatched by some 4 times effective Brick Breaks. Next up is her Ace Lycanrock, who keeps trying to counter us until he just decides to stop and we Brick Break it down. Honestly, I feel like I'll never understand this Lycanrock AI. Next up is Giggleth, who poses no offensive threat to us, but is kind of a tank, so it takes a little bit to take it out, but eventually goes down to the might of the dragon. Finally, she's down to just her Kraydilly, who actually poses no threat at all, and we karate chop it down. Now we're down to just the final and probably the toughest Elite Four member, Kailey. Her team really just matches up well against ours. She leads with Braviary, who's an absolute physical powerhouse, so we lead with Salamence to intimidate it and bring its attack down a little bit. The first turn we hit it with a Rock Slide and we get a lucky flinch, which is really what we needed. Unfortunately, we get a 10% miss on the next turn. You know, it's a give and take. So it hits us with a Scary Face and now it has speed control. And its Brave Bird does kind of a lot of damage on the next turn. Luckily, we hit the next Rock Slide and we finish it off. Next up, she sends in Mandibuzz, who does nothing other than hit us with annoying confusion and tank a bunch of hits. We hit it with a Rock Slide through confusion on the first turn, but unfortunately, through a series of hitting ourselves in confusion 3 times in a row and Brave Bird from this thing, we're forced to swap out and bring in Haxorus, who hits a Rock Slide on the first turn it's in, and then thankfully hits a Rock Slide through confusion to finally finish this thing off. Next up, she sends in Hawlucha, who does have the Dragon type move Dual Chop, but it doesn't go for it. Instead, it hits us with a Flying Press, which does decent damage, but nothing to be too worried about, especially because we still have our berry, and we're able to snap out of confusion and hit 2 Dragon Claws on it to take it out. Next up, she sends in 2 Cannons, so we send in Turtonator, and we're easily able to wall this thing. And even though its Z flying move does do pretty good damage to us on the first turn, we're able to set up max iron defense and then set up max attack with Shell Smash. Then we smack it with a +6 Rock Tomb on the next turn. And we do the exact same thing to our last Pokemon, Oricorio. Now it's down to just the final showdown against Hau. He has a really well-rounded team, and his Primarina now has the Fairy type, so we're gonna have to be really cautious around that thing. But first things first, he leads with Alolan Raichu, so we lead with Garchomp and take it out with a Dig. Next up, he sends in Crabominable, and this thing does have a 4 times effective Ice Hammer on Garchomp, so we bring in Komodo, and luckily the Ice Hammer misses. And on the next turn, we almost take it out with a Brick Break, but it lives and it's in range for a full restore, so it gets a heal. No big deal though, a couple more Brick Breaks are more than enough to take it out. We know Hau is going to see this 4 times effective Fairy move on Komodo and send in Primarina, which he does, but luckily we have a plan. We send in Jerry Seinfeld from the Bee Movie, who's able to just live a non-critical Moonblast, and then it outspeeds on the next turn and absolutely smacks this thing with the Choice Specs boosted Sludge Wave, which is more than enough to take it out, and honestly, that's his last scary Pokemon down. Next, he sends in Tauros, so we swap to Salamence. Unfortunately, we don't have any instant moves, so Hau's able to get a full restore off on the Tauros, and unfortunately, our Fly on the next turn doesn't take it out, so this Tauros does end up outspeeding and taking out Salamence with a critical double edge on the next turn. RIP, you did well, buddy. We bring in Haxorus, which is able to live through another double edge on the next turn, and we just start setting up Dragon Dances. We get 2 Dragon Dances off, and we go for a final, even greedier 3rd Dragon Dance, and the Tauros ends up taking itself out with Recoil, and our Haxorus lives. And you already know this Noivern is going down to a +3 attack and speed Haxorus. Now he's down to just his last Pokemon, Flareon, which we take out with 1 final Rock Slide. And with that, we're Alola's first ever champion. Thanks for watching.